Lemon Amiga presents a Playguide video review. Sit back and enjoy the show.
Hey there, welcome to another Lemon Amiga play guide and review. This time we'll be checking out Burning Rubber. This was developed by Harlequin and published by Ocean Software on the Amiga and on the Atari ST in 1993. At the start of the game we can see some credits and also an introduction as well. Amiga was famous for its demo-like effects, and this game shows off those demo-like effects, just like you've got a public domain demo, and this one has sampled in great huge big chunks of the Utah Saints track called I Want You. It's great to see a demo-like introduction on some of these games, and this definitely makes this game a cut above some games which were released on the Amiga. But even though this introduction is very flashy, and maybe it also comes with an epilepsy warning as well. So that's the introduction, and then once we've seen enough of that we can press the fire button, and that takes us on to the actual menu of the game itself. And from here we can change the controls, the sound options, and also the difficulty as well. Checking out the controls, we can also use a mouse or a keyboard, and we can have automatic gears or manual. And for the sound, it brings up the obligatory magnetic field type of in-car cassette radio player, and here you can choose between two sets of tracks, the dance tracks or the rock tracks.
3, 2, 1, go!
This game does come with a suite of music. Unfortunately you cannot change those after you've chosen that on the options screen. And let's change the difficulty mode to easy for this. Then before the fun begins we also get to choose our ride, and here it presents us with maybe half a dozen different cars. Usually the highest top speed and the highest acceleration is pretty good, and this one accelerates in about 8 seconds, which is faster than a Ford Fiesta, so definitely the Golf GTI is the one that I'd recommend. It's the one that I'm going to go for on the particular playthrough. Then we'll get to go into the shop where we can't afford anything, I don't think, at the very start of it. Let's see, well, we can afford an upgrade of tyres, so let's go for that as the one and only upgrade that we can choose. And then it will show us a top-down view of the course that we're meant to drive, and by holding the controller in the direction and then pressing the fire button, we can then click on the map which direction that we want to travel, and that will bring up a set of arrows on the screen. And by following those arrows, that should hopefully mean we can get through this course. You can see we start off in 6th position, and you can see the player at the top of the screen and a nice readout of all our competitors, well, just like Power Drift. At the very start of the game, the car is difficult to drive and it doesn't turn very easily either. And you can see that it will slip around on the road and it will veer off to the side, and it does give us a great immense sense of speed as well. And oh no, here comes our first junction. Very many games on the Amiga and very many driving games, it does give us multiple ways to go, and this is definitely vital, because if you make the wrong move, sometimes you can go completely the wrong way. And junctions which go straight ahead are great because it means we don't have to do anything, but if a junction turns, we'll have to brake at the right moment and we'll have to turn. And if you get that right, then you can turn around. If you get that wrong, then you'll veer off onto the roadside obstacles, in this case rocks. So if you get that wrong, you'll take some damage. You can see the damage counter is kind of in the top middle left kind of area on the screen. You can see we're on 37% damage at the moment, 40% now, and that will go up every time we veer off that road. So it's very difficult to stay on the road, and like Lotus 2, you can't clang your way down the road as fast as possible because that will take damage. Damage costs a fortune at the end of the race, and of course as soon as you hit 100% damage, that's the race over. And I think you get a number of retries as well, and time is ticking down. That must be the time to the end of the level. After that, we'll get a breakdown of our scores and our time. Player 1 managed to do that in 2 minutes 22, and that means that we were quite some seconds ahead of all the other racers. We can then press fire once we've seen all the stage completion times, and you can see a nice background as well with tyre tracks on there, and then it will give us the total race points awarded. In this case, we've got 10 points. Unfortunately, it's Doctor's $1,250 because we crashed a few times, and now it gives us the opportunity with unlabeled images to click on them and find out what they are and to upgrade. Definitely the tyres is what I'd recommend on every stage, on every car. If you can afford the tyres, keep going for them, and we can upgrade all these things at various levels as well. So you can see if we can't afford them, everything's greyed out, but if we can afford them, like the head polish and cylinder heads, and we can have tons and tons of different upgrades in this game. Now we move on to another scenario. This is London. You can see where we start, and the checkered flag is where we're meant to end. So hopefully if we move south here and then along there and then cut in and then turn there, that only gives us 2 tight turns. At the start of every race, it's pretty hairy to get past all those meandering drivers, and hopefully we only need to get past 6 of them, and then the road is fairly clear from here on in as long as we stay upon it. You can see this is a night course, and that means that the colour scheme will be night, and this definitely reminds me of the Lotus 2 night course. And look at that, made a complete hash of that T-junction. You'll find T-junctions and 90-degree corners in this game, and the normal bends are simply meandering left and right just like this. Occasionally as we drive we'll find other drivers on the road, and at this point all those drivers are simply people driving around through London, and it's great that we get some road signs as well saying Ocean on the side. Ocean Software, of course, never afraid to self-publicise in their titles. So here we are at number 1, and as long as everybody's moving around the stage, that should mean that we can stay in front of everybody. But as we shall see a bit later on, it definitely depends on the route that you've taken, and sometimes different opponents will take different routes in the game, and that makes things a little bit harder. So we're through a junction now, and you can see cars passing directly in front of us on junctions, reminding me of City Cars, a game that, well, we haven't reviewed on this channel, but if you go to the Lemon Amiga website, you'll find my review of City Cars on that page, and that means that we get cross-town traffic, which means that you have to avoid them, otherwise you'll take some damage, and you really don't want too many head-on collisions in this game, certainly not with the police. Yes, there are police in this game, and they will follow us and track us down and try to ram us off the road. Luckily, if we're already going top speed in whatever car we're driving, we shouldn't have any problems with them, and they don't pose any threat, unlike they did in Crazy Cars 3. Back once again, we can see we managed to thrash all the opponents. We're now on 20 points, and because we didn't take too much damage, we didn't take too many penalties either at the end of that race. So yet again, going for tyres is the number 1 priority, and then turbo would be a good idea, but it's pretty expensive. Are we going? Yes, we're going to go for a turbo, and unfortunately you can't click on everything on this page, but you can click on most things, and we can give us a turbo boost if we want for 1,000, and that will give us a temporary turbo boost. Unfortunately we'll drive off the road if we try to use that, so we can't really do that. So guess what we're going to do? We're going to save the rest of that money. Then we move on to Holland and the Netherlands. It's a quick route all the way through that. Unfortunately we only get to see windmills on the horizon, and they don't turn, unfortunately. And you can see lots of lampposts. They certainly do like to light up the dark here in the Netherlands. Occasionally we'll pass over bridges and rivers as well, and we can sink into those rivers just like Lotus 2. I don't think that gives us any damage, but that will definitely slow us down, and if we make any more than 2-3 crashes on these courses, or make a complete meal of the junctions, that will mean we're going to get overtaken by the other drivers, and that's definitely what you don't want to happen. And on this very easiest level it's not too much of a problem because we can simply glide straight through it. Once you get onto the medium and the hard difficulty, definitely you don't want to be crashing into anything, and you want to be driving as cleanly as possible, which means you have to be balancing all the time on the edge of a adhesion and on the edge of trying to stay on that road and meandering off it. So you have to observe the perfect speed as we're gliding around these corners, and sometimes you have to nudge the brake just slightly in order to stay on the road. Moving through that Dutch countryside, you can see some huge trees on the side of the road and some bushes as well, and the police again, which really won't do much of a thing to stop us. Definitely on this easy mode, maybe the police get more difficult a bit later on. You can see I'm really struggling to time the stopping, because every time you upgrade the brakes that will make a difference to the stopping distance, and the tyres as well. So sometimes when you upgrade the car, definitely if you get an extra turbo and things like that, you'll be driving a bit quicker. So every time you upgrade the car, you'll have to judge the stopping distance at junctions again. And so if you have a really terrible car with grade 1 tyres and not very much speed, you can take longer to brake. And if you have a really fast car with amazing grip and amazing tyres and amazing brakes, that means that will take a shorter time to brake. We can now afford the superchargers and the turbochargers and everything else, and definitely I'd recommend going for those as soon as possible. Every single thing that we upgrade will make a difference, and sometimes it's best to save that cash in case we need it, because don't forget, repairs will also cost us a lot of money as well. And it looks like we're being tempted by the exhaust that will speed us up a tiny little bit. Heading through Paris, you can see the road junctions now are a bit more complex, and there are at least 3 or 4 different ways to go on this stage. As you can see, the weather effects continue, and if you couldn't get enough of the magnetic fields dark mode, then definitely the magnetic fields line of rain dropping down the screen is quite familiar. Apart from these raindrops is cyan, as well as the trees. And when was the last time you saw cyan rain? Well, if you do see cyan rain, then it's probably a good idea to get on a plane and run for the hills, because that probably means it's not very good. And in the meantime, you can see some lightning appears on the horizon, and you can see one layer of parallax scrolling on the horizon, and a nice implementation of the Eiffel Tower as well. And these guys, again, the Parisians, really love the road lamps, and that really does give us a great sense of speed. Unfortunately, it probably would have been better to have more variety on the roadside items, because all we seem to get is rocks, trees and street lamps in this game. Burning Rubber is one of those mysterious games that gives us a heads-up display of our dashboard in our car in front of us, like a first-person view, and then it gives us a rear view of our car in front of us on the screen. So it kind of has mixed messages, and maybe this game would have worked just as well as a first-person game like Test Drive. And in the meantime, it works like a third-person game, and it's pretty good to have those readings at the bottom of the screen, so you can keep an eye on them. But hopefully if we're travelling at top speed, you really don't need to bother looking at the dashboard. Only $175 now for repairs, which is good, and we've upgraded the tyres to the maximum. So what do we go for in this case? And again, it's a tough choice because we only have limited money, and the superchargers, that'll give us a bit better acceleration and not really much else, but that means if we do much crashing it will help. On we go to Germany, through it looks like the Alps, and you can see that we can be preparing for a snow-like effect on this level.
Here we go.
It's winter time, it looks like, in Germany, and unlike the sound of music, the echoing hills are alive to the sound of our engine misfiring, and this being a hot hatch race, you would expect it to do that, particularly when this came out in 1993. And you can see another magnetic fields rip-off Lotus-like, snow-like effect. And unlike Lotus 2, we don't get banks of snow on the road, but we do get a tiny few banks of snow on the sides of the road, and it's great to see the chevrons have snow on top of them as well. So there is a background which is the sky colour, which is made out of a nice load of colours and a nice copper effect, so they haven't just put a blank background in, and it does give us again a nice sense of speed as we're rallying, literally rallying through this scenery. See, our road position will leap ahead when we overtake drivers who are taking opposite and different routes, and so every time you pass a car you don't automatically expect that to change, and it's great to see cars actually following us on the road, which again isn't apparent in quite a lot of races on the Amiga. Definitely Cisco Heat had the 90-degree corners, and it also had cars following us as well. And just in case you thought the Crazy Cars 3 barriers in the centre of the road couldn't get here and couldn't get any worse, yes, there they are, and if you crash into the barriers of course we'll take damage. So we don't have trucks coming the opposite way, luckily on this version, unlike Crazy Cars 3, but you can see that they have borrowed quite a lot of elements from other races on the Amiga, and this came out on the Amiga and the Atari ST, so it was a 16-bit only title. These courses are fairly short and we're already rapidly heading towards the end of it, so that's quite fun. It means once we get into the lead, all we need to do is stay there, and that gives us a nice ride to the end. So let's see what we have in the shop. Let's reveal what there is to buy, and you can see some of them even appear twice. There's two exhausts on the screen. I've no idea if those are different or if they are the same. In fact, there's three exhausts according to that, and exhaust number 2, well, we've already bought exhaust number 1 already, and there is even body panels that you can choose to buy as well to protect the car from damage. And I didn't bother buying body panels unfortunately on this playthrough, and let's save that cash. Arriving now at Barcelona. We can go north from the start, or we can go directly south, and that's probably what I should have done, and that saves us going around all these houses. In Spain you can see some giant cacti cactuses reminding me that we're in the middle of Mexico, and giant huge boulders as well, which remind me that we're in the middle of Argentina. But we're not, this is supposed to be Spain, and some Moroccan palm trees are there as well, so we can see that there are different elements available on each one of these stages, and they are completely different, and there isn't oil on the road which makes us skid out either, unlike Lotus and things like that. So that's great, it means we can simply concentrate on the road at this stage, and again it really gives us a great sense of speed. And look at that kind of dip into the bush section there definitely reminds me of Chase HQ. And if you take a quick look at the cover art for this game, that cover art definitely also reminds me of Chase HQ. So definitely this was, or it seemed to be, a borrowed game from lots of other racing games on the Amiga, and Ocean were simply desperate for a cheap cash-in racing game whilst the genre was hot in 1993. After that we'll move on to the second stage of the game, and the final stage. Unfortunately this is America, and yet again we'll get to choose our car. I think it's fantastic that there are different cars available in the game, and you don't have to stick with the same one all the way through to the end. And you can see a vast variety, and even trucks available as well. Again, the acceleration is what we really need to worry about, and Camaro, or let's go for this Chevy Corvette. It's got 5.3 seconds and top speed of 160 miles per hour. Now it gives us 4,000 cash, so we didn't need to save any cash up from the previous level, but we didn't need to spend it either because we no longer have that car, we no longer have access to it. We've arrived all the way over at Washington DC for a cross-country American road race, and now we can see spiralling things all over the place. That means it's going to be pretty difficult at the end. The next set of cars move a lot quicker than the previous set of cars, and even this one, it doesn't appear to have much grip whatsoever, and you can see that the corners are really tight as well once you get over to these stages, so you can't automatically cruise straight through without crashing, and that just makes things a bit more interesting. And again, you'll have to have your eyes peeled on those arrows, and as soon as the arrow points forward, you simply do nothing. And look at that, the police also getting a bit more aggressive as well on these later stages. Because we're driving a different car, we're also going to have to get used to the brakes as well, and the stopping times for these junctions. And you can see this is a lot harder than the European tracks, and the corners and the traffic as well, making life more interesting for us. So this game isn't particularly dull, and it carries on going at high speed all the way through it, and it doesn't stop for a second. You can't relax on the controller, you always have to be either speeding up or slowing down, and even on this easy level it gives us a thrill ride going through the game. Again, if we miss a junction completely, that means we'll have to go the long way around, and you can see we don't even feature on the board at the top of the screen. And finally, right at the end of the level, you can see we've only managed to catch up to 4th because we missed the junction, and look at that, only just made that one. So we're not slowing down quickly enough, we're not taking our time with the slowing it down, and there's two things we can do about that. Number one, we can take our time more and slow down earlier, or we can simply buy ourselves some more brakes. Better things about this game is it does have a great soundtrack, and I really do like this techno thumping beat. Unfortunately, it kind of doesn't vary too much from track to track. I think there are maybe 3 or 4 tunes that vary on each of the settings, the rock setting and also the dance setting, and there are definitely more tunes on this version that are playing at the moment. And this is Burning Rubber, the enhanced version. Burning Rubber was actually released in 2 separate versions. The OCS version, which actually required 1 megabyte of memory, and I think that actually required 1 meg of chip RAM, I'm not quite sure, and that didn't have the top display you can see with the drivers' heads on it, and that had less music as well. And there was also an enhanced version, which is the one that we're playing at the moment, and that was also called the A1200 version. And the AGA version, even though it doesn't require an O20 CPU, nor does it require the AGA chipset, it will work on any Amiga as long as it has 2 megabytes of chip RAM. And so if you have the Fat Agnes and the Fatter Agnes, and you have maybe an Amiga 3000, this game will work. It does not require AGA, and you can run this on a fast CPU. I'm actually playing this obviously on the old 30 at the moment, and it moves at a nice speed, and it does move a bit slower if you're playing this on a AWOL processor machine that happens to have 2 megabytes of RAM. So this is the enhanced version, and it isn't enhanced very much except for, like I say, a few more music tracks in the game. Moving through to New York, we can even see pedestrians ahead, and if you run over pedestrians it will give us damage, and that's a little bit of extra fun in the game. The programmers didn't have to do that, and it's just a massive pity that the words pedestrian ahead blocks out 50% of those pedestrians on the horizon, so you can't actually judge the gap, how to weave in the middle of them. And if that appeared before the pedestrians, that would have been helpful, and not during the actual pedestrians in the road. On the Amiga there aren't too many games with pedestrians in the middle of the road, and Nitro on the Atari ST had them, and maybe a few games like that, but I haven't seen too many of these 3.5D racers have that on the Amiga, and that's definitely a comical touch. And most of the magazine reviewers said that this game was dull and boring and it didn't have a sense of humour. Well, it does have a sense of humour, as we shall see a bit later on with these pedestrians, and you can see skinheads and punks in New York, and we'll have to avoid them, and running over pedestrians is novel. It's something that you don't often get to do. Notice that the road layouts don't really change very much from level to level. The roads turn left and right to the same degrees, then you find the same T-junctions, and then it's back to the weaving left and the right again. And again, luckily these sections are quite short, and 2 minutes is the average playing time, depending on how fast your vehicle moves. And you can see that we thrashed the opposition again on that particular run, and as long as we do that, of course, we can afford the best upgrades, and that means we can keep the car in tip-top condition as we move through the races. And I think if you can't afford the repairs, it's a one-way ticket to the end of the game, but as long as you can keep buying those turbos, it should mean that we have the edge of the opposition. Especially as we play in the very easiest mode in the game. I haven't actually tried this on the medium or the hard, but that is definitely something to watch out for. Next up, we're moving to the desert, and it presents us with a Jaguar XJ220 kind of particle effect, where the wind blows us around, and that adds to the atmosphere again because wind blowing us around, and really tight chase HQ section, and endless signposts on the road instead of chevrons, and it looks like we're travelling yet again through Monument Valley. Burning Rubber was coded and designed by Nathan Whitaker, who ended up being the lead designer and coder on the Driver game, released for the PS1 in 1999. Driver 1, I definitely remember that game, and he also moved on to work on several 007 licenses for Electronic Arts. Graphics were drawn by a large number of people, including Anthony Thornton, who continued working on racing games after this, also Andrew Sharratt, who also moved on to work on Driver again in 1999, and also Driver 2, which appeared on the PS1 in the year 2000, and he then worked on Grand Theft Auto 4. Also, Nick Bagley worked on the graphics, and he went on to design the later Harry Potter games and also The Sims 4. Lastly, this music that you can hear was created by Tim Haywood, and he also created the music for Sink or Swim that we've reviewed, and also top-down block puzzle racing game Universal Warrior, where you have to race a robot around a level and shoot things as quickly as possible, and it's like a killing game show, only a top-down view, and you get to shoot things. I really have got great respect for Universal Warrior, even though most of the graphics aren't drawn very well, and that's what most of the magazines said about this game. The graphics are very lazily coded, apparently, according to them, and I don't find the graphics too bad. They're not as chunky as Power Drift, for example, or even City Cars for that matter, and you can see that I'm actually driving off the road trying to slow myself down for that corner. So I don't think the graphics are too bad, and these effects that you can see on offer don't slow the action down either. At least they don't with the CPUs I'm using, or at least the old 20, and they do slow down if you have a triple O CPU trying to play this game. Yet again, moving through that championship, you would expect it to be pretty easy at this point, and we're moving through now towards the end of the game, and there are maybe 20 tracks in total, and once we've moved through them, that's game over. There's only 2 continents that we can fly to, unlike Jaguar XJ220, which took us all over the world. And I like this screen and the animation and the woman and the fan and everything else. It's pretty similar to Supercars 2, where we get to upgrade the car, and these upgrades really do make a difference, and unfortunately not a huge difference to our ride. next we've reached Las Vegas. And Las Vegas is a desert course, so maybe there will be another effect going on. You can see some of the avenues go through trees and some of them don't, some of them go through deserts. And you can cancel these routes and go backwards if you like, if you make these mistakes. And this is a long run, you can see, so it's going to take some extra time for us to get all the way through it. This game reminded you of Rad Racer, then the similarities are more apparent on this particular level, because in Rad Racer we do get a Las Vegas background, and that's pretty similar to this particular game. On the Las Vegas level you will find colourful trees and colourful signs by the side of the road and lots of neon lights as well, and those areas moving to the dark. So you can see we do move through various different types of elements. I'm not quite sure why there are fairy lights dotted around in the trees. Maybe that's what happens when you go to Las Vegas. I've never actually been there. And there are quite some trees apparently in Las Vegas and not too many hotels. You can see there are elevation changes. It appears that we're going downhill at the moment, but they aren't too obvious, and we really don't plunge up and down hills like many driving games that we've seen. In fact, going uphill now, look at that. But in fact this game feels like it's fairly flat even if we are moving up and down hills. So you can see that the background is fairly funky, and you can also see that we're having to avoid the junctions, and the sign of the junction telling us that it's turning, and the arrow again blocks out most of that, which is a pain that doesn't disappear until you've actually got around it. At this stage there is a lack of enemies, and you expect the enemies to be pouring around us, but this being a rally game, you can see I'm actually 5th on the road according to that, and we've made up a few places towards the end, and I'm not sure if I've actually chosen the fastest route possible, and that makes a huge difference. And look at that, we took too much damage, that means we're wrecked, and we get 2 credits in the game to try that again, all over again, from the very start of it. So let's try that again, and in this game, well, I think it's fun that it changes the chevrons into little lights and things like that. And the roadside obstacles, again, make sure it's nice and quick, but it seems pretty repetitive.
Congratulations!
And it doesn't have the variety that you would expect from a game like this. Maybe it would have benefited from fewer levels, but actually more going on as you're driving through them. The music in the shop isn't bad either. Unfortunately, there is no light switch on the wall to turn the lights out, things like that. So all we can do is to buy those upgrades again and hope we've chosen a good car to be able to do that, and going for as much speed as we can, and we're not too worried about the tyres at this point. Look at that, by the time we get into the Hollywood Hills, it means it looks like we're going to have to go all the way down through La Brea and all the way up there to the, tar pits, and all the way down, it looks like as far as San Diego in this thing. and you can see the ending is a very straight line. We have to continue straight on for it looks like the entire length of the map. And the hardest thing in this part of the game, of course, is to find the quickest and the best route, because it looks like the spaghetti junction at this point, and so you'll have to decide which way to go.
Box. Set. Go.
Check out the fog effect now, as it's always foggy in Los Angeles, and definitely this game, if you're in any doubt that this borrows heavily from Rad Racer, yes it really does, and definitely levels like this really show off those palm trees, and we get pretty similar speed to Rad Racer, and we get pretty similar corners as well, which will make us veer off and skid out. And it has pretty similar controls to Rad Racer as well, only unfortunately it's not quite as good as that game. You can see pedestrians on the road again, and they're now wearing raincoats and got dogs in front of them, so yet again the humour, which wasn't in Rad Racer, but Rad Racer definitely had the environments, it had the speed, it had the atmosphere, and it had the playability as well, and it didn't have so many annoying T-junction corners to slow down every 5 minutes. But you can see that this game does try to take those elements, and you can see some great graphics, and you can see that we've already taken 50% damage already, which isn't too great, and we can only guess how far we've got to go on this massive level. As you see me doing that, we'll just check out those scores, and most of the magazines commented about the Utah Saints introduction, and before we move on to those scores I'll just mention that the inlay for this game, the instructions mentions the Utah Saints, and the credits mention the Utah Saints, and all the magazines commented about the Utah Saints, but unfortunately I had the opportunity to work for the Utah Saints at the Wickerman Festival many years ago, and I asked them, have you heard anything about burning rubber? And they said, no, I've never even heard of it. We used the Atari ST back in the day, recorded everything on the ST. So what they probably did for the introduction tune is copy their ST module across, and that's probably what we got. But unfortunately the Utah Saints didn't know anything about that, and when they appeared on the Retro Hour a couple of years ago, they were asked, of course, about this game, and yet again they said, we haven't got a clue about that game, never heard of it mate, I haven't got a clue. So Utah Saints did not get paid for having their licensed music in the game, even though that's one of the things that the magazine said was one of the best parts about it. So perhaps Ocean Software ripped off one too many elements in the game, and definitely it reminds me of Rad Racer. Unfortunately we don't get the turbo effect, or even a turbo at all, unless we buy the Nitro, and as a Rad Racer rip-off, this isn't quite as good as it could have been, unfortunately. The magazine reviewers all gave this a very mixed score indeed. The lowest score came from Datum magazine, which is Swedish, and they gave this 20%. Britain's C Amiga gave this 41%. Amiga User International gave it 52%. The Lemon Amiga score is 52%. Amiga Dream gave it 53%. Amiga Action managed to give this 58%. At the other end of the scale, of course, Amiga Joker is laughing its head off, giving this 73%. The One gave it 78%, Amiga Format gave this 78, and Amiga Power, Stuart Campbell even awarded this 79%, even though it complained about the controls, it complained about the graphics, the lack of sense of humour. You can see guys with surfboards walking around the street on this particular level, and he complained about everything about the game, and yet he gave this 79%, which means the average score is around about 5.5 out of 10. I think as the Amiga's version of Rad Racer, it's not too bad, and they certainly could have made this a heck of a lot worse. You would expect it to be smooth in 93, which it is. You would expect it to be fast, and you would expect it to be about 4,000% better than the Outrun conversion that we got on the Amiga, which, it goes without saying, of course is. And unfortunately, great graphics, great playability, and great sound, and great music and everything else were above and beyond these standards by the time we get to 93, because Lamborghini American Challenge had come out by this time, and we also had Lotus 3 as well, so this game was slightly behind the times, and if it had better drone graphics it would have been better. You can see the end graphic is a pretty shoddy rendition of a bike with a woman on it, and it says, "You've got first prize, here's a bag of loot," and then it will take us on to the high score table. So you can see a much better, well done ending screen there, and you can see some characters from the game, perhaps even drawn from the programmers and the graphic coders of the game, and that would be great if that was true. So you can see somebody lifting up a trophy in the background, and number 1 is missing because apparently that's us. So well done, congratulations, you've now completed Burning Rubber on the Amiga. So this game does have some good points and some strengths, and if you're in the mood sometimes for some cross-country rallying, there isn't too many games which are this good on the Amiga. Definitely Toyo Celica GT Rally was a handful. Definitely Lombard RSC Rally was an even bigger handful, and very frustrating as well. So there aren't too many of these hot hatch racers, and this game even had the codename Hot Hatch when it was being designed. Unfortunately, you can see the programmers hadn't even bothered to colour in the high score table, and as a result 95% of the scores you can see on the high score table are unintelligible, and they blend in to the background. So that isn't particularly well done, and that's probably why the magazine said that this was a rushed out game. Thank you once again for reviewing this Lemon Amiga review, and I'll see you again in another one. Thank you.